Hello, my name is Paul Swinney and I'm going to present on the main findings of our Private Sector Cities report. The Office of Budget Responsibility has forecast that 600,000 public sector jobs will be cut by 2015-2016. So this means that cities really do need now, more than ever, to create private sector jobs to fill up and replace the public sector jobs that will be lost. So this chart here shows the activity of working age adults in 2008, and you can see that around half of adults were employed in the private sector and around a fifth were employed in the public sector. So if public sector jobs are going to be cut, then it means that the orange segment of this chart is going to slide back. And that means that the green segment has got to slide back further round if we're not going to have an increase in non-employment. But the problem is that the geography of private sector performance varies massively across England's cities. So between 1998 and 2008, some places had massive increases in jobs, such as Brighton, such as Milton Keynes, but it wasn't just a north-south story. Places such as Preston and Wakefield and even Sunderland had large increases in private sector jobs. But a key issue is that despite this being a period of macroeconomic expansion, very stable national growth, there were some cities that actually lost private sector jobs. Places such as Burnley, such as Stoke. Stoke, for example, lost 20,000 private sector jobs. And so this shows that the geography of private sector is very uneven across the country. But even when you look at all jobs, so not just private sector jobs, but public sector jobs too, you can see that actually some places which were not creating enough jobs to support the populations within their boundaries. So we looked at the jobs deficits that exist within England's cities, and we said that if certain cities wanted to increase their employment rate to the national average in 2008, how many extra jobs would they have to create? And in Hull, that was 20,000 extra jobs were needed to provide employment for people within their city. In Birmingham, that was even larger. Almost 125,000 extra jobs would have to be required to increase Birmingham's employment rate up to the national average. And in total, an extra 620,000 extra jobs will be required in England's lagging cities in order to bring them up to the national average. This means is that if people want to access employment, they may have to look beyond their own city boundaries to access those jobs, because the cities that they're in just aren't generating enough jobs to provide employment for them. But this isn't such a controversial or new message. This chart, it shows the share of total English population that different areas of England have had since 1801. And you can see actually that during the Industrial Revolution, the North and the Midlands had massive increases in population because you had a big increase in opportunity within the cities, within these areas. But as you can see that when you had a structural shift in the economy, actually the share of England population of these areas started to decline, and it had an increase in the southeast and the east of England. So population rebalancing is something that is quite natural and has happened through time. Planning law within England now actually prevents somewhat of this rebalancing. If you look at this chart here, you can see that you would expect house building to respond to price signals. But you can see here there's absolutely no relationship. Darlington, for example, is highlighted. A lot of house building, but actually the price isn't very high. And all this serves to do actually is push down the price of houses and impacts house owners within those areas. So what we need is planning actually to be relaxed somewhat to try and encourage and support growth in the areas where you've got highest demand for housing and for business. So what does this mean for cities? Well, what we did was we split cities onto a spectrum and said that some cities are buoyant, and this goes through to some cities that are sort of stable in their performance, and you've also got struggling cities. And what national policy should do is recognise that actually you need different types of policy for these different types of places, because these places aren't the same, and you can't have the same policy treatment in a place such as Brighton, for example, as a place as Hull. So our recommendations for buoyant cities centre around planning. These places should be expanded, because if you have an expansion, that means you're not putting constraints on growth, but it also means if you have greater house building, and actually that's going to suppress the price somewhat and allow people to access that opportunity instead of them being priced out of these places. Strategic capital investment should also be prioritised in these places to allow them to expand and remove constraints to growth. There are 4 key recommendations for struggling cities. The first is that politicians should stop making lofty claims that people can get jobs wherever they want to live. As the statistics in the report show, that simply is not true. There needs to be a re-evaluation of the built environment policy. They shouldn't go building loads of houses in struggling cities because the demand simply isn't there. The third is that we're not recommending that these places should be abandoned. On the contrary, there's valuable economic activity within these areas, and that should be protected. So any business assets that are within this area should be supported. Struggling cities should also concentrate on skills because they have very poor skills profiles. But they should bear in mind that by focusing on skills, upskilled people may then go and move elsewhere to seek opportunity because that opportunity does not necessarily exist within their city. But that's okay, because if it improves their quality of life, if it improves their quality of outcomes, then surely that is a good thing.